2 weeks before Thanksgiving, at exactly 6:18 in the evening, my mother withdrew $18,000 from the wedding account I had spent 3 years building. And 7 days before my wedding, 200 guests drove to an empty dirt lot in Ridge Hill, Georgia, because she had canceled every single vendor behind my back. If you enjoy stories where the truth eventually catches up to the people who try to control it, take a second to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And before we go any further, tell me something in the comments. What time is it where you are right now? Because my story started exactly 8 months before that empty lot, and it began with a phone call that arrived 11 minutes after the happiest moment of my life. My name is Vera Westbrook. I'm 28 years old. 8 months ago, on a Tuesday evening in late spring, Nathan Cole proposed to me in the smallest kitchen you could imagine. No restaurant, no photographer hiding behind a plant. Just Nathan, standing barefoot on the linoleum floor, holding a ring he had saved for 7 months to buy. He looked nervous in a way I had never seen before. Not scared, just serious. The way someone looks when they are about to say something that will change the rest of their life. He cleared his throat and said, "I don't have a speech. I just know I want every morning to start with you." I said yes before he finished the sentence. The kitchen light above us flickered slightly, the way it always did, and for a moment the diamond caught the light and scattered it across the cabinets. Nathan laughed, not loudly, just that quiet laugh he has when he's relieved something important worked out. We didn't pop champagne, we didn't call anyone immediately. We sat on the kitchen floor with our backs against the cabinets and just looked at the ring. For 11 minutes, the world was exactly the way it should be. Then my phone rang. Mom. I answered without thinking. "Hi, Mom." There was no congratulations, no excitement, just her voice, flat and focused. "Where are you having it?" I blinked. "Having what?" "The wedding, Vera, the venue. Where is it?" Nathan tilted his head slightly from across the kitchen floor, listening. We hadn't even talked about a wedding yet. "Mom, he literally just proposed." "Well, you need to start making calls. Venues book a year out. I can handle the vendors for you." That sentence should have been my warning. But my mother had spent my entire life teaching me something very specific. Saying no to her meant abandoning her. When my father died, I was 19. At the funeral, she held me so tightly my shoulders hurt, and she whispered something into my ear that I didn't fully understand at the time. "It's just us now. You're all I have." That sentence became a kind of gravity in my life. Every decision slowly orbiting around her approval. Which college, which major, which apartment, which job. So when I said Nathan and I were thinking of planning it ourselves, she went quiet. 4 seconds. I counted them. "Fine." Her voice softened immediately. "I understand. You don't need me anymore." The guilt arrived instantly, like a switch flipping inside my chest. "No, Mom. Of course I need you. I want your help." Across the kitchen, Nathan watched my face carefully. He didn't say anything, but his jaw tightened slightly. I didn't know it then, but that was the first move in a game my mother had been preparing for longer than I realized. 3 months after the engagement, the wedding didn't feel like mine anymore. It happened gradually. First, she offered to make a few calls because I was busy teaching 3rd grade at Ridge Hill Elementary. Then she started attending vendor meetings without telling me. Then one day, I discovered she had changed the contact number on the florist account to her phone. I wanted wildflowers, sunflowers, lavender, baby's breath, loose and bright and alive. My mother ordered white roses, elegant, controlled, respectable. You'll thank me later. I wanted barbecue catering, pulled pork, cornbread, sweet tea, something that felt like us. My mother laughed. "You can't serve barbecue at a wedding. People will talk." She rearranged the seating chart, moved Nathan's family from the front rows, replaced them with her friends from church. Every time I pushed back, even gently, the same thing happened. Tears. A tissue appearing in her hand like it had been waiting there. "I'm just trying to make this beautiful for you. Your father would have wanted it this way." And every single time, I folded. Nathan never raised his voice, but I started noticing something. He spent longer hours in his workshop. Sometimes I would find him standing at his workbench, staring at the wall instead of building anything. One night, my maid of honor, Rachel Alvarez, came over for dinner. Rachel had been my best friend since 8th grade. She watched my mother rearrange the centerpiece samples I had picked, without asking, without hesitation. Rachel said nothing, but later when she was leaving, she grabbed my arm near the door. Her voice was quiet. "Vera, I need you to trust me on something." I laughed nervously. "What does that mean?" She squeezed my hand. "Don't ask questions yet." Then she walked to her car and left. At the time, I thought she was being dramatic. I didn't know Rachel had already started preparing for something. 2 months before the wedding, my mother invited Nathan to lunch, just the two of them. She said it was to talk about family things. I thought that meant she was finally accepting him. Nathan came home that afternoon and sat down across from me at the kitchen table. He folded his hands, carefully, the way he does when he's choosing his words. "Your mom told me something today." My stomach tightened. "What?" "She said you had a breakdown in college." The room tilted slightly. She used the phrase, "damaged goods." I stared at him. After my father died, I had gone through a rough semester. I saw a counselor, missed a few classes, but I worked through it. It wasn't some dark secret. It was just grief. "What did you say?" I asked quietly. Nathan didn't hesitate. I told her I don't see damage. I see someone who survived you. Something inside my chest cracked open. Not pain, something warmer. Later that night, my mother called me. "Nathan disrespected me at lunch." "Mom, he's isolating you from your family, Vera. That's what men like him do. Carpenters, blue collar, no ambition." I looked at Nathan across the kitchen. He was sanding a chair leg quietly. "My father was an accountant, Mom." "Yes, and your father is gone." The silence that followed felt heavy. "Don't you dare throw that at me." She hung up. For the first time in my life, I began to wonder something. Was my mother protecting me, or was she trying to make sure I never left? 6 weeks before the wedding, the rumors started. Small at first. I walked into Patty's hair salon on Main Street, and Patty leaned close to the mirror. "Honey, are you okay? Your mama said things aren't going well at home." The next day, the cashier at Dale's Market looked at me with pure pity. Ridge Hill has a population of 4,000 people. In a town that small, rumors don't travel. They teleport. Within 48 hours, half the town believed I was unstable, fragile, not ready for marriage. And my mother was the concerned widow trying to protect her daughter. That Thursday evening, my phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "Don't react to anything your mom does this week. Trust me." I stared at the screen. "Rachel, what do you know?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Her reply was only 3 words. "Be patient." That message should have scared me. Instead, it made me curious. Because Rachel sounded like someone who already knew how this story was going to end. And 5 weeks before my wedding, my mother made the first move that proved just how far she was willing to go. 5 weeks before my wedding. At exactly 9:02 on a Saturday morning, Nathan's mother called him with a question that made my hands go cold. Nathan put the phone on speaker so I could hear every word. "Vera, is there something about you I should know?" That was the moment I realized my mother wasn't just interfering with the wedding. She was trying to dismantle my life, one relationship at a time. Before I continue, I want to ask you something. If someone in your own family started telling people you were unstable just to stop your wedding, what would you do? Would you confront them immediately? Or would you stay quiet and watch what they were planning? I didn't know the answer yet, but that morning changed the way I saw my mother forever. Nathan's mother, Gloria Cole, had one of those voices that carried kindness even when she was worried. But that morning, her tone was careful. "Nathan, Diane called me last night." Nathan glanced at me before answering. "About what?" She said Vera has a history of episodes. The word hung in the kitchen like smoke. Episodes. Gloria continued slowly. "She told me Vera needed psychiatric treatment in college, and that you might not understand what you're getting into. My hands went numb. I didn't speak. I just watched Nathan's face. He didn't look angry. He looked focused. "Mom," he said calmly, "Vera saw a counselor after her dad died. That's it. Diane is twisting it." There was a pause. Then Gloria exhaled. "I believe you, honey." But she was very convincing. She cried. Of course she cried. My mother had always known exactly when to cry and when to stop. After the call ended, Nathan placed his phone on the table. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said something that changed everything. "Your mother isn't protecting you, Vera. She's trying to own you." Hearing someone else say it out loud felt like stepping into cold water. Part of me already knew, but another part of me had spent 28 years defending her. "Don't fight with her over this," I said quietly. "That's exactly what she wants." Nathan nodded, but I could see something shifting behind his calm expression. Clarity. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly above us. For the first time, I started replaying old memories differently. The birthday parties that somehow became about my mother's sacrifices. The college acceptance letter she read before I did. The boyfriends who slowly disappeared after private conversations with her. At the time, I thought she was protecting me. Now I wondered if she had been protecting something else. Control. And she wasn't finished. The rumors got louder the following week. I walked into the teacher's lounge at school, and the room went quiet. Not awkward quiet. Careful quiet. The kind people use when they think someone might break. Mrs. Daniels, the oldest teacher in the building, handed me a cup of coffee. "Honey, if you ever need to talk." That sentence confirmed what I already suspected. My mother had been busy. 2 days later, I found out just how busy. Nathan was sanding a cabinet door in the workshop behind our house when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and frowned. It was his mother again. He answered. "Hi, Mom." This time, Gloria sounded more serious. "Nathan, Diane called me again." Nathan closed his eyes briefly. "And what did you say this time?" Gloria hesitated. "She told me Vera is emotionally volatile." The word felt like a slap. Volatile. "She said you should know what you're getting into before the wedding." I watched Nathan carefully. He leaned against the workbench. "Mom, you've met Vera. You know her." Gloria sighed. "I do. That's why I'm calling you. Because what Diane said doesn't match the woman I know." Relief flooded my chest. But it didn't last long. After the call ended, Nathan set his phone down slowly. "Your mom is calling everyone in my family. Every single one." I knew it was true. And the terrifying part was how easy it would be for her. Small town, sympathetic widow, concerned mother. All she had to do was cry. Nathan walked over and took my hands. "Look at me." I did. "Whatever she's trying to do, it's not going to work." I wanted to believe him, but doubt had already started creeping in, because money was involved, and my mother controlled the wedding contracts. Nathan and I had spent 3 years saving for that wedding. 3 years. $18,000. Teacher paychecks, Nathan's weekend carpentry jobs, every extra dollar carefully planned. I opened the budget spreadsheet that night while Nathan worked quietly across the table. Florist, $2,200. Caterer, $4,800. Venue deposit, $3,500. Photographer, DJ, rentals. It added up quickly. Most of the vendors had strict cancellation policies. 30 days, and we were only 5 weeks away. If the wedding fell apart now, we would lose almost everything. Nathan noticed the numbers on the screen. How much would we lose if it collapsed right now? Most of it. He nodded slowly. $18,000. 3 years of work. Gone. I closed the laptop. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I said something that surprised even me. "My mother wants me to fail." Nathan didn't argue. He just said something simple. "Then we don't let her win." At the time, I believed the worst thing she could do was spread rumors. I thought embarrassment was the limit. I thought the damage would stay social. I was wrong, because the following Monday, exactly 7 days before the wedding, I made a phone call during my lunch break that revealed something much worse. I was sitting at my desk grading spelling tests when I decided to confirm the flower delivery. Just routine, nothing dramatic. The phone rang twice. Magnolia Florals, this is Dawn. Hi, Dawn. This is Vera Westbrook. I'm just checking on the order for Saturday. There was a pause. A long pause. Then Dawn said something that made the pencil slip out of my hand. Ma'am, that order was canceled 3 days ago. My heart skipped. Excuse me? Your mother called and said the wedding was off. I hung up. My fingers were already dialing the caterer. Miss Westbrook, we received the cancellation Thursday. Your mother said, click. I didn't let him finish. Next call, the venue. I'm sorry, Miss Westbrook. Mrs. Diane Westbrook canceled the reservation. She said the family had decided. The world tilted. I sat there staring at my phone. 3 vendors, canceled. All of them, behind my back. I called my mother immediately. She answered on the first ring, as if she had been waiting. Mom, you canceled my wedding. Her voice was calm. I canceled a mistake. That wasn't your decision. Everything about you is my decision, Vera. I gripped the edge of the desk. You don't get to control my life. She exhaled slowly. I raised you. I fed you. I buried your father alone. This wedding is mine to give or take. Something inside me changed in that moment. Not anger, something colder. No, I said quietly, it isn't. And for the first time in my life, I hung up on her. 20 minutes later, I was sitting on the kitchen floor when Nathan walked in from the workshop. He didn't ask questions right away. He just sat beside me. After a long silence, I finally said it. She canceled everything. Nathan nodded once. Okay. 7 days, I whispered. No venue, no flowers, no food, no money left for replacements. Nathan took out his phone. I'm calling Rachel. He explained the situation in a few sentences. Rachel didn't interrupt. When he finished, she said something strange. Don't call any vendors. Nathan frowned. Why? Just trust me. I need 48 hours. Nathan looked at me. I nodded slowly. 48 hours, he said. Rachel hung up. For the next 2 days, I waited, and those 48 hours felt longer than the entire 8 months of wedding planning. Because I had no idea Rachel had already been preparing for this moment for half a year. And 5 days before my wedding, she showed up at our door with a manila folder thick enough to change everything. 5 days before my wedding, at exactly 4:12 in the afternoon, Rachel Alvarez knocked on our front door, holding a manila folder so thick it barely closed. And the first sentence she said when she walked into the kitchen was something I will never forget. I knew your mom was going to try something like this. Nathan and I looked at her in complete silence. For 2 days, Rachel had told us nothing except wait. 2 days where every hour felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Now she was standing in our kitchen, like someone who had already seen the ending of the movie. Before I tell you what was inside that folder, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had someone in your life who saw danger coming long before you did? Someone who quietly prepared for a disaster you didn't even believe was possible? That was Rachel, and what she had done over the previous 6 months changed everything. She sat down at our kitchen table, the same table where Nathan proposed, the same table where I had learned my mother canceled the wedding, the same table where most of the important moments of my life seemed to happen lately. Rachel placed the folder down slowly. I need you to let me finish before you react. Her voice was calm but serious. I nodded. Nathan leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Go ahead. Rachel opened the folder. Inside were contracts, printed emails, receipts, a guest list, and something else. A backup wedding. The day your mom volunteered to handle the vendors 6 months ago, Rachel said, I started making contingency plans. I blinked. 6 months? Rachel nodded. Do you remember your college graduation? Of course I remembered. It had been one of the worst days of my life. My mother arrived 40 minutes late, started a fight with my roommate's parents over parking, then spent the entire reception telling people my teaching degree was a waste of time. I cried in the bathroom. Rachel held my hair back while I tried not to throw up from humiliation. That day, I promised myself something, Rachel said quietly. I would never let your mother ruin another milestone for you. She slid the first contract across the table. Elmwood Garden Estate, a private property 12 minutes outside Ridge Hill, owned by a woman named June Whitfield. A small event venue, surrounded by pecan trees and wildflower fields. Rachel tapped the date at the bottom of the page. Signed 6 months earlier. Deposit $2,000. Paid by Rachel Alvarez. You paid for this? Rachel shrugged. You would have done the same for me. I stared at the contract. 6 months? She had been planning a backup wedding before I even realized my mother was dangerous. Nathan let out a slow breath. Rachel, this is insane. Rachel flipped another page. Not insane, prepared. She began laying out the rest of the documents like a general explaining a battle plan. Florist, Sandy's Blooms, from Carterville. Wildflowers, sunflowers, lavender, baby's breath. Exactly what I originally wanted. Caterer, Big Jim's Smokehouse. Pulled pork, cornbread, brisket, sweet tea. Nathan laughed for the first time in days. Barbecue at a wedding. I knew it would happen eventually. Rachel continued. DJ, my friend Marcus. Photographer, my coworker Lena. She shoots weddings on the side. I looked at the receipts. Total cost? $6,500. Rachel had already paid the deposits. Rachel, my voice cracked. You spent all this money. You can pay me back whenever. Nathan shook his head. We will pay you back. Rachel waved a hand dismissively. That's not the important part. She slid another sheet across the table. The guest list. 200 names, every phone number, every email address, color-coded, yellow, green, red. I stared at it. What is this? Communication plan. Rachel leaned forward. The morning of the wedding, I will send a mass text to every guest. Venue upgrade, new address. Arrive at Elmwood Garden Estate. Nathan frowned. What about your mom? Rachel met my eyes. She gets the original address. Only the original address. The room went quiet. For the first time since the cancellations, I felt something unexpected. Hope. Rachel continued explaining. 15 key guests will receive personal phone calls. Nathan's parents, Uncle Tom, your closest friends. Anyone important enough to redirect if something goes wrong. Everyone else gets the text message. By the time Diane realizes what happened, the ceremony will already be starting. Nathan looked at me carefully. What do you think? I didn't answer immediately. Part of me still felt the instinct to protect my mother. But another part of me had started waking up. The part that had spent years being controlled. Rachel pulled one more document from the folder. Something else. I called someone yesterday. She slid a business card across the table. WRD-GTV. Local news station. Reporter Maggie Coulter. Nathan raised an eyebrow. Why is the news involved? Rachel shrugged slightly. They love community stories. Best friend saves wedding after family sabotage. A feel-good segment. I stared at the card. A camera crew felt like crossing a line. Rachel studied my face carefully. You don't have to say yes. But Vera, your mom already made this public. I frowned. What do you mean? Rachel turned her phone around. A Facebook post. My mother's account. Please pray for my daughter. She is rushing into a marriage despite serious mental health concerns. I have done everything I can to protect her. My heart broke reading those words. 800 people had already reacted. Comments filled with sympathy, prayers, concern. My mother had turned me into a cautionary story for the entire town. Rachel's voice was calm. She went public first. This just lets the truth catch up. Nathan squeezed my hand. The decision felt heavy, but also strangely clear. For the first time in years, I asked myself a simple question. What do I actually want? The answer surprised me. I want my wedding. The one I planned. The one she tried to erase. I looked at Rachel. Let's do it. Rachel nodded immediately. Good. Then we start today. She began assigning tasks like a project manager. Nathan would continue acting normal. No confrontation with my mother. No warning. No suspicious changes. Rachel and I would quietly finalize the backup vendors. Every communication would stay private. Total silence. Nathan leaned forward. How long have you been planning this exactly? Rachel smiled slightly. 6 months. Nathan shook his head in disbelief. Remind me never to play chess with you. That night I barely slept. Not because I was scared anymore. Because I was remembering things. Moment that suddenly made sense. Every birthday she turned into a story about her sacrifices. Every boyfriend she warned away. Every achievement she minimized. Teaching is nice, but it's not a real career. My father had once said something to me 3 days before he died. We were standing in the kitchen washing dishes. He dried his hands and looked at me. Don't let anyone shrink you, Vera. Not even me. I didn't understand what he meant at the time. Lying awake that night, I finally did. At 6 in the morning, I called Rachel. Let's activate the plan. You're sure? Yes. Good. I made one more phone call that morning. My Uncle Tom Westbrook, my father's younger brother, retired Army, a man who had quietly stayed outside my mother's orbit for years. Uncle Tom answered on the second ring. Morning, kiddo. I took a breath. Uncle Tom, can I ask you something important? Shoot. Will you walk me down the aisle? The silence on the phone lasted 3 seconds. When he spoke, his voice sounded rough. Your daddy would be proud of you. I sat on the edge of the bed after the call ended. For the first time since the cancellations, I felt steady. Here is what I did not do. I did not call my mother. I did not argue. I did not explain. I did not beg. For the first time in 28 years, I chose silence. Not the silence of fear, the silence of someone who had finally decided something. And 3 days before the wedding, my mother showed up somewhere she had no right to be and proved just how desperate she was becoming. 3 days before my wedding, at exactly 11:26 in the morning, my mother walked into the hallway of Ridge Hill Elementary and announced to the front desk volunteer that her daughter might be having another episode. She said it loud enough for half the school to hear, and that was the moment I understood something important. She wasn't trying to stop the wedding quietly. She wanted to destroy my reputation publicly. Before we go further, I want to ask you something. If someone tried to humiliate you at your workplace, in front of your coworkers, someone from your own family, how would you react? Would you confront them right there? Or would you stay calm and let the truth reveal itself later? Because what happened in that hallway forced me to make a decision I had never made before. I had to choose between protecting my mother's image or protecting my own life. The hallway outside my classroom smelled faintly of floor cleaner and crayons. 22 third graders were outside at recess. I was refilling my water bottle at the drinking fountain when I heard her voice. Loud, sharp, familiar. I'm here to check on my daughter. I froze. I looked up and saw Diane Westbrook standing near the front office desk in a navy blue coat. Perfect posture, perfect hair, the image of a concerned parent. Except she wasn't speaking quietly. She was projecting, the way people do when they want witnesses. I'm worried about her stability. The volunteer at the desk looked confused. Ma'am, do you have an appointment? My mother lowered her voice slightly. Not enough. She's been unstable before. I'm afraid she might be having another episode. 2 classroom doors opened down the hallway. Teachers stepping out. Curious, concerned. My stomach dropped. I started walking toward her, each step echoing slightly on the linoleum floor. My sneakers squeaked. Mom? My voice was steady. This is my workplace. Please leave. She turned toward me slowly. For half a second, her expression looked surprised. Then the performance started. Her eyes filled with tears instantly. Vera, I'm just worried about you. Mrs. Patterson, the fifth-grade teacher, stepped into the hallway. Mr. Gaines, the custodian, stopped pushing his mop bucket. Two parents waiting for conferences stared openly. My face felt cold, not embarrassed, empty. Mom, you need to go, right now. The front office secretary finally stepped forward. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the building. My mother straightened her shoulders. For a moment, she looked at every face in the hallway, almost like she was measuring how many witnesses she had. Then she looked back at me. You'll see. Everyone will see. She walked toward the exit. The front door closed behind her with a soft click. The hallway stayed frozen for several seconds. Then Mr. Gaines resumed mopping. The teachers quietly returned to their classrooms. The world slowly resumed moving. A hand touched my elbow. Mrs. Daniels, the 62-year-old reading teacher who had been at the school longer than anyone else. She leaned close and whispered something. Honey. My mother was the same way. 5 simple words. Don't let her win. Those words carried me through the rest of the day, because the truth was, I was exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. Living inside someone else's control for 28 years does something to your brain. It makes you question your own instincts, even when the evidence is obvious. That evening, I drove home slowly, the Georgia sunset turning the sky orange, behind the pecan trees along Route 12. Nathan was already in the kitchen when I walked in. He looked up immediately. Something happened. I nodded. Your future mother-in-law just tried to diagnose me in front of my entire workplace. Nathan closed his eyes briefly. Then he pulled out a chair. Sit. I told him everything. The hallway, the witnesses, the performance. Nathan listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said something quietly. She's escalating. I knew he was right, because people who are losing control rarely do it gracefully. 2 days before the wedding, we had what should have been the rehearsal dinner. Nathan's mother, Gloria, hosted it at her house, a cozy ranch-style place with a wraparound porch and white string lights Nathan installed the previous summer. About 30 people were there. Nathan's family, Rachel, Uncle Tom, a few close friends. Fried chicken, potato salad, sweet tea. It felt warm, normal, like the kind of family gathering I had always imagined. My mother was not invited. At exactly 7:15 in the evening, we heard a car door slam outside. Rachel and I exchanged a look. A moment later, the front door opened. Diane Westbrook walked inside, carrying a bottle of wine. Gloria froze in the doorway. Diane, we weren't expecting you. My mother smiled politely. I'm the mother of the bride. She stepped inside as if the invitation had always existed. The living room went silent. Nathan's cousin Danny set his fork down slowly. Uncle Tom straightened in his chair. My mother poured herself a glass of wine, her own bottle. Then she raised it slightly. I'd like to make a toast. Nobody stopped her. That's how she operated. She counted on people being too polite to interrupt. I just hope Nathan knows what he's signing up for. A murmur rippled through the room. My mother continued calmly. I hope this marriage lasts longer than Vera's attention span. Nathan's hand tightened around mine under the table. Gloria stood up, her voice calm but firm. Diane, that's enough. My mother took a slow sip of wine. I said what needed to be said. Then she placed the glass down and walked out. The screen door slammed behind her. The room remained silent for several seconds. Then Nathan squeezed my hand. Gloria crossed the room and knelt beside my chair. Her eyes were wet. I'm sorry I ever doubted you. Then she said something that stayed with me. You belong in this family. Always. For the first time that week, I felt something shift. The narrative my mother had been spreading was starting to crack. People were seeing her behavior for themselves. But she wasn't finished. The next evening, my phone buzzed while Rachel and I were folding napkins in her apartment. A screenshot from my coworker, Jenny. Another Facebook post. My mother's account again. Please pray for my daughter. She is rushing into marriage against medical advice. My chest tightened. Against medical advice? There was no doctor, no diagnosis, nothing. Just another lie released into a town where rumors traveled faster than truth. 800 people had already seen it. My hands started shaking. Rachel took the phone gently. Don't respond. Rachel, she just told the entire town I'm mentally unstable. Rachel's expression stayed calm. Tomorrow, the truth will speak for itself. Nathan called 20 minutes later. He had seen the post too. I'll drive over. Stay with Rachel tonight. I agreed. Rachel put my phone in a kitchen drawer. No screens tonight. She made chamomile tea. We sat on the couch quietly. No strategy, no planning. Just breathing. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly. And something inside me finally changed. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of my mother, not of the rumors. Because for the first time in my life, I understood something clearly. Control only works when the other person keeps cooperating. And I had finally stopped. The next morning was my wedding day. At exactly 6 a.m., Rachel was already on the phone. Venue upgrade, new address. Arrive at Elmwood Garden Estate. Her spreadsheet sat open on the kitchen table. 200 guest names. Color-coded. Yellow. Text sent. Green. Confirmed. Red. Needs call. By 10 in the morning, 197 guests had confirmed the new location. 3 couldn't attend. None of them knew what my mother had done. And one person never received the new address. Diane Westbrook. As far as she knew, the wedding was still happening at the original venue. The venue she canceled. The empty lot. At noon, I stood in Rachel's bedroom, putting on my dress. Ivory lace, tea-length, $60 from a consignment shop in Atlanta. My mother had called it embarrassing. I called it mine. Uncle Tom arrived at 1:30, wearing a gray suit. He looked at me and stopped in the doorway. Lord, Vera, you look just like your father. Stubborn and beautiful. Rachel checked her watch. Ready? I took a breath. For the first time in 28 years, I was. But 12 minutes away, my mother was driving toward an empty dirt lot, expecting to watch my entire life collapse. Chapter 5. On the morning of my wedding, at exactly 2:43 in the afternoon, my mother parked her silver sedan in front of the Ridge Hill Community Pavilion and stepped out, wearing pearls and a navy blue dress. She wasn't dressed for a ceremony. She was dressed for victory. Because as far as Diane Westbrook knew, 200 guests were about to arrive at an empty dirt lot and watch her daughter's life collapse. What she didn't know yet was that one text message had already rewritten the entire day, and she was the only person in town who hadn't received it. Before I continue, I want to ask you something. If someone tried to publicly humiliate you in front of hundreds of people, but the plan backfired completely, would you tell them the truth right away? Or would you let them walk straight into the consequences of their own actions? Because Rachel had made a very specific decision. No one would warn Diane. Not one person. Elmwood Garden Estate looked nothing like the original venue my mother had canceled. It sat at the end of a gravel road, lined with pecan trees, just outside Ridge Hill. A white wooden gate opened onto a rolling lawn filled with wildflowers. Sunflowers, lavender, baby's breath. Exactly the flowers I had chosen months earlier before my mother replaced them with white roses. Rachel had restored every detail. String lights hung between 2 ancient live oaks. Wooden chairs lined the aisle. Not rental chairs. Nathan had built them himself, one every weekend for the past year in his workshop. At the time, I thought he was just staying busy. I didn't realize he had been building our wedding piece by piece. The smell of barbecue drifted across the lawn. Big Jim himself stood beside a smoking pit wearing a denim apron. Pulled pork, cornbread, sweet tea in mason jars. Everything my mother said would embarrass the family. Guests began arriving around 2:30. Almost every single one of them stopped walking the moment they stepped through the gate. They stared. Some laughed in disbelief. Others pressed their hands to their chests. Mrs. Henderson whispered to her husband, "This is better than the original venue." Nathan's mother Gloria arrived and immediately found me near the trellis. She wrapped her arms around me tightly. "This is exactly what your wedding should look like." Maggie Coulter, from WRDG-TV, arrived quietly with a cameraman. They stayed near the edge of the garden, not intrusive, just documenting. Rachel had briefed them carefully. The story they were filming was simple. Best friend saves wedding after last-minute disaster. They didn't need to know every detail yet. The guests kept arriving. 100, 150, 197 chairs eventually filled. Every person who mattered had found the new location. Except one. At exactly 3 p.m., Uncle Tom took my arm at the beginning of the aisle. His grip was steady, but his voice was rough. "Slow steps. Make it count." The music started, not a full orchestra, just a guitar. Rachel's friend Caleb, sitting under the oak tree, playing the song Nathan and I danced to on our first date. I stepped forward. 200 faces turned toward me. Some smiling, some already crying. Nathan stood at the end of the aisle, wearing a dark suit and an expression I will never forget. His eyes were red, and he wasn't trying to hide it. When Uncle Tom placed my hand in Nathan's, he leaned closer and whispered, "Take care of her, or answer to me." Nathan nodded. "Yes, sir." The ceremony itself was simple. Nathan's college friend David officiated. He had gotten ordained online specifically for us. Nathan said his vows first. His voice broke once when he said the word home. When it was my turn, I didn't read from a card. I just looked at him. "I choose you, not because I need to be saved, but because I finally know I deserve to be loved without conditions." The garden went completely quiet. Even the wind seemed to pause. I don't need permission to be happy. Not from anyone. Not anymore. Nathan squeezed my hand. David smiled. "By the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." Nathan kissed me. 200 people stood and applauded. The sound rolled across the garden like a wave. And 12 minutes away, something very different was happening. My mother stood alone in the middle of an empty dirt lot. She walked toward the pavilion, expecting chaos. Cars arriving, guests confused, maybe reporters, maybe humiliation. Instead, there was nothing. No chairs, no tents, no flowers, no guests. Just silence. At first, she probably assumed she was early. She checked her phone. 3:07 p.m. The ceremony should have already started. She looked around again. Still nothing. That was the moment the first crack appeared in her plan. She called my phone. It rang. I didn't answer. She called Rachel. Voicemail. She called Nathan. Voicemail. Then she started scrolling through her contacts. Danny. Voicemail. Gloria. Voicemail. Jenny. Voicemail. 9 calls. 10. 11. No one answered. She stood there in the middle of that empty lot, turning slowly in a circle, with her phone pressed to her ear. The cicadas buzzed in the summer heat, and for the first time in her life, my mother had absolutely no control over what was happening. Eventually, someone answered. Nathan's distant cousin, Bev, 74 years old, hard of hearing, probably the only person who hadn't been fully briefed about the plan. Bev spoke loudly through the phone. "Oh, Diane, didn't you get the message? The wedding got moved. Elmwood Garden Estate. Pretty place out on Whitfield Lane." My mother hung up immediately. 25 minutes later, her silver sedan turned onto the gravel road leading to Elmwood. She parked outside the white gate. From the driveway, she could hear music, laughter, Clinking glasses, the smell of barbecue, everything she had tried to erase. She stepped out of the car slowly, her heels crunching against the gravel. When she reached the gate, she stopped. A man stood there holding a clipboard. Kyle, Rachel's friend, 6'2", calm, professional. He had been hired for exactly one purpose. "Good afternoon, ma'am. May I see your invitation?" My mother straightened her posture. "I'm the mother of the bride." Kyle looked down at his list. He scanned it slowly. Then he looked up. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your name isn't on the guest list." For the first time in decades, Diane Westbrook had encountered something unfamiliar. A door she couldn't open. She stared at him. There must be a mistake. Kyle remained polite. "No mistake, ma'am. I checked twice." Through the gate she could see everything. The flowers, the guests, Nathan with his arm around me. Our wedding alive and glowing inside the garden. And between her and that world stood a clipboard and a guest list, with her name nowhere on it. "I understand this is difficult," Kyle said calmly, "but I can only allow listed guests inside." For the first time in her life, my mother was standing on the outside of a celebration she had tried to destroy, and the key was no longer in her hands. But the story didn't end there, because Diane Westbrook had never been the type of person who walked away quietly. And the moment she noticed the camera pointed in her direction, everything started to unravel. At exactly 3:18 in the afternoon, while I was cutting the first slice of our wedding cake, my mother was standing outside the white gate of Elmwood Garden Estate, shouting that she had given birth to the bride. And 20 feet away from her, a television camera was recording every second. That was the moment the mask finally cracked. Before we continue, I want to ask you something. Have you ever seen someone who spent their entire life controlling the narrative suddenly lose that control in public? Not privately, not quietly, but in front of witnesses. Because what happened outside that gate didn't just ruin my mother's plan. It exposed her, completely. Inside the garden, I had no idea what was happening. Nathan and I were standing beside the dessert table, cutting our small 2-tier cake. Buttercream frosting, a few wildflowers on top. The cake topper was 2 tiny wooden figures Nathan carved himself. I had found wood shavings in his workshop weeks earlier, but pretended not to notice. Guests surrounded us, phones out, laughter, the kind of warm noise that fills the air when people are relaxed and happy. Outside the gate, things sounded very different. My mother's voice rose sharply. "This is my daughter's wedding. I am her mother." Kyle remained calm. "Ma'am, I understand that, but your name is not on the guest list." Her voice sharpened. "I gave birth to her." Several guests near the gate turned their heads. Nathan's Aunt Margaret whispered something to Mrs. Henderson. Neither woman looked surprised, just disappointed. Rachel had anticipated this moment. When she sent the venue change message that morning, she included one important sentence. "Due to unexpected vendor cancellations by a family member, the ceremony location has been moved." She never used my mother's name, but in a town of 4,000 people, no one needed it. Everyone had already done the math. My mother suddenly noticed the camera. WRDGTV, the small red light glowing. Maggie Coulter standing beside the cameraman. At first, my mother froze, just for a second. Then, instinct took over. Tears appeared immediately. Her shoulders slumped. Her voice softened. "You don't understand. My daughter is very fragile. I'm just trying to protect her." Maggie didn't interrupt. She just kept filming. Kyle didn't move. "Ma'am, I still can't allow you inside." The performance faltered. My mother's eyes darted between the camera and the garden. Through the open gate, she could see me laughing with Rachel near the cake table. Alive, happy, not broken, not humiliated. Everything she tried to prevent was happening anyway. And people were watching, really watching. Not the sympathetic looks she usually received. These were different, recognizing, understanding. My mother realized something in that moment. Her story wasn't working anymore. The tears stopped. The mask slipped. Her voice turned sharp again. "This is ridiculous." Kyle remained steady. "Ma'am, if you continue causing a disturbance, I will have to ask you to leave the property." For several seconds she said nothing. The camera remained fixed on her. Then she did something unexpected. She turned around, walked back to her car, opened the door, and drove away. No dramatic exit, no screaming, just a silent retreat. Rachel watched the silver sedan disappear down the gravel road. She took a sip of sweet tea and returned to the reception like nothing had happened. I didn't learn any of this until days later. At that moment, I was dancing. Nathan pulled me onto the grass near the oak trees while Caleb played guitar. The fairy lights had started glowing as the sun dipped lower in the sky. For the first time all year, I felt completely relaxed. No tension, no anticipation, just happiness, the kind that doesn't need permission. Later, we sat at long wooden tables, eating barbecue on paper plates. Nathan's 7-year-old nephew Brady chased fireflies across the lawn. Gloria laughed so hard at something Uncle Tom said that she spilled her sweet tea. People told stories, real stories, not the carefully controlled version of life my mother always preferred. Rachel caught my eye from across the table. She raised her mason jar. I raised mine back. No words needed. That night, after the last guest left and the garden lights blinked softly in the darkness, Nathan and I sat on the porch steps of our house. My shoes were off. His tie hung loose around his neck. The air smelled faintly like smoke and jasmine. "There's something I didn't tell you earlier," he said. Nathan pulled out his phone. He opened an audio file, dated 6 days earlier, 10:47 p.m. "What's this?" "Your mom called me that night." He pressed play. Her voice filled the quiet porch. "She had a breakdown in college. Did she tell you the full story?" I closed my eyes. "She can't handle stress. She'll fall apart eventually. Walk away now. Save yourself." The recording ended. The cicadas filled the silence. I sat there, absorbing the sound of my mother's voice. The same voice that read bedtime stories when I was little. The same voice that told me I was fragile, broken, too sensitive. For the first time, I heard it clearly, not loving, controlling. I exhaled slowly. I'm not damaged. Nathan didn't answer. He didn't need to. He already knew. I looked at the phone. I want to send that recording to Maggie Coulter. Nathan studied my face carefully. "Are you sure?" "My mother told 800 people on Facebook that I'm mentally unstable. She told the town my marriage was a mistake." I folded my hands. I'm not destroying her reputation. I'm just letting people hear her real voice. Nathan nodded slowly. "And the vendor cancellations. The emails where she pretended to be you." "Rachel has all of them." I looked out across the quiet yard. The porch light flickered slightly. "This isn't revenge." I said it quietly, more to myself than to Nathan. "This is just the truth, without her editing it." Nathan placed his arm around my shoulders. The warm Georgia night wrapped around us. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked once. Then everything went quiet again. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a blank sheet of paper. Not an email, not a text. A letter, handwritten, because some things should cost effort. I wrote 3 drafts before I found the right words. The first was angry. The second was too forgiving. The third was honest. "Mom, I love you. But love without boundaries isn't love. It's captivity." I folded the letter carefully, wrote Diane Westbrook on the envelope, and handed it to Uncle Tom to deliver. I didn't ask how she reacted. I wasn't ready to know. But a week later, something unexpected happened. The story about my wedding aired on local television. And in a town of 4,000 people, the truth spreads even faster than rumors. 9 days after my wedding, at exactly 6:03 in the evening, The local news in Ridge Hill aired a 4-minute segment about a maid of honor who saved her best friend's wedding after a mysterious family sabotage. They never said my mother's name, but in a town of 4,000 people, they didn't need to, because everyone already knew. If you've ever lived in a small town, you understand something important. Secrets don't stay buried. They wait. And then they surface all at once. That evening, Nathan and I sat on our couch eating leftover barbecue, while the 6 o'clock news played quietly on the television. Rachel texted 15 minutes earlier. "Turn on Channel 8, it's about to air." Nathan muted the room lights, and we watched. Maggie Coulter appeared on screen, standing under the live oak trees at Elmwood Garden Estate. Behind her, the fairy lights glowed softly. Her voice was warm and calm. Last weekend, a Ridge Hill bride thought her wedding was ruined after every vendor suddenly canceled just days before the ceremony. But thanks to one determined maid of honor, the wedding happened anyway. The footage shifted. There I was, walking down the aisle with Uncle Tom, the camera catching the flowers, the chairs Nathan built. Guests smiling, Nathan wiping his eyes. They showed Rachel standing near the gate with her clipboard. Then, a short interview clip. "When someone you love is about to lose something important," Rachel said simply, "you don't wait for permission to help." The segment never mentioned my mother directly, but Maggie included one line that changed everything. The vendors had reportedly been canceled by a family member pretending to be the bride. Nathan and I looked at each other. Neither of us spoke. The camera cut to guests dancing under the lights, the garden glowing, and the segment ended with Maggie saying something that sounded simple but carried weight. Sometimes community shows up when someone tries to tear it down. The broadcast lasted 4 minutes, but in Ridge Hill, it might as well have lasted 4 hours. Because within 24 hours, everyone had seen it. And the questions started. The first sign came the next morning at Patty's hair salon, the same place where the rumors about me had started weeks earlier. Patty called me around noon. "Honey, I think you should know something." "What?" "Your mama came in this morning." I waited. Patty hesitated. "I told her I saw the news. Then I asked her if it was true she canceled your vendors pretending to be you." My chest tightened. "What did she say?" "She started crying." "Of course she did." But Patty's voice softened slightly. I didn't comfort her this time. I just told her something. "What?" Patty sighed. "I said, Diane, sometimes loving your child means letting them grow, not holding them hostage." 2 days later, the Ridge Hill Women's Auxiliary sent my mother an email. The same organization where she had served on the board for 6 years. The message was polite, short. "We believe it would be best if you take a temporary leave while recent events settle down. In small towns, reputation is currency." My mother had spent years carefully building hers. The devoted widow, the protective mother, the woman who sacrificed everything. But reputation only works if the story holds together. Now people were starting to see the cracks. Neighbors stopped waving when they passed her driveway. Sunday church potluck invitations stopped arriving. Conversations ended when she walked into rooms. The silence around her grew louder every day. Uncle Tom called me one evening, about 2 weeks after the wedding. He had stopped by my mother's house to check on her, not because he agreed with her actions, because he was that kind of man. Steady, loyal, even when someone didn't deserve it. "She's having a hard time," Tom said carefully. I stirred the pasta sauce on the stove while Nathan worked in the garage. "What happened?" "She called me last night, crying, said Rachel turned you against her." I closed my eyes briefly. "And what did you say?" Tom didn't hesitate. "I told her nobody turned Vera against you. You pushed her." There was a pause on the phone. Then Tom added something else. "She tried another angle." "What angle?" "Said you were manipulated, that Rachel poisoned you." I almost laughed. "What did you tell her?" Tom's voice stayed calm. "I said Rachel saved a wedding you tried to destroy." She hung up after that. I leaned against the kitchen counter. The house smelled like garlic and tomato sauce. Through the window, I could see Nathan sanding a table leg under the porch light. For a moment, I imagined my mother sitting alone in her kitchen, the same kitchen where I grew up, looking at old photos, trying to understand how the story slipped out of her control. Tom spoke again. I drove by her place tonight, saw the lights on. She was sitting at the table looking through photo albums. Which ones? Her wedding album, the one with your dad. I felt something shift inside my chest. Not anger, something quieter. Sadness, maybe. Because despite everything she had done, my mother wasn't a villain in her own story. She was a woman who lost her husband too early. A woman who never learned how to live without control. But pain doesn't excuse cruelty. That was the line I had finally learned to draw. I told Tom something then that surprised him. If she agrees to see a therapist, I'll meet with her once. One session. Family counseling. That's my offer. Tom was quiet for a moment. That's generous, kid. It's not forgiveness. It's a condition. Later that night, Nathan and I sat on the porch again. The warm Georgia air wrapped around us, the cicadas buzzing softly in the trees. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah." I looked out across the yard. I just realized something. What? My whole life, I thought I needed my mom's approval to be okay. Nathan waited. Turns out, I just needed boundaries. He smiled slightly. That's a good trade. I leaned my head on his shoulder. For the first time in years, my life felt quiet, peaceful. But the story wasn't finished yet, because 3 weeks later, something unexpected happened. Something that revealed the second layer of what my mother had actually done. And it involved money. A lot of money. And paperwork she thought no one would ever check. 3 weeks after the wedding, at exactly 10:14 on a Tuesday morning, I received an email from Magnolia Florals that began with a sentence I hadn't expected. Miss Westbrook, after reviewing the cancellation request made in your name, we need to clarify something. Nathan was in the workshop sanding a cedar table when I opened that email. And the moment I finished reading it, I realized my mother hadn't just sabotaged my wedding. She had committed something much more serious. Before I continue, let me ask you something. If someone impersonated you to cancel contracts involving thousands of dollars, someone who knew your personal information, someone who believed you would never report them, what would you do? Because that was the moment the story moved from family drama into something else entirely. Something with paperwork, signatures, and legal consequences. The email from Magnolia Florals was short but careful. Their office had been reviewing vendor cancellations after the news segment aired. Apparently, 2 separate employees remembered something strange about the phone call my mother made. The woman who canceled the flowers had introduced herself as Vera Westbrook, but she never provided the correct email confirmation code tied to my account. Instead, she insisted she was the bride and demanded immediate cancellation. At the time, the staff assumed it was a stressed bride making a last-minute decision. But after watching the news story, they decided to look closer. Attached to the email were 2 things, a call log and a voicemail. The call log showed the number used to cancel the contract. It belonged to my mother. The voicemail recording was clearer. Her voice, sharp, controlled. "This is Vera Westbrook. I'm canceling the order immediately. Please process the refund." I sat back in my chair slowly. Nathan walked in from the workshop, wiping sawdust from his arms. "Something wrong?" I turned the laptop toward him. He listened to the voicemail once, then again. He exhaled slowly. "She pretended to be you." I nodded. "She didn't just spread rumors. She impersonated me." Nathan leaned against the counter. "That's fraud." The word hung in the air. Fraud. The next email arrived 20 minutes later, from Big Jim's Smokehouse. Their office had also reviewed the cancellation request. Their call log showed the same number, my mother's, and the same introduction. "This is Vera Westbrook. Cancel the catering order. Total deposit refunded." $4,800. Nathan frowned. Did she keep the money? That was the first question that made my stomach twist, because the answer wasn't obvious. We checked the bank account where the wedding deposits had originally been paid from. Nothing had been returned. No florist refund. No catering refund. Which meant something strange. The vendors had processed refunds, but they hadn't gone back to us. Rachel arrived 20 minutes later after I called her. She brought coffee and a laptop. Let's look at the contracts. Rachel had copies of everything. She always kept documentation. Every deposit receipt, every vendor email. Within an hour, we found the answer. My mother had changed the refund instructions. When she canceled the contracts, she provided a different bank account. Her account. Nathan sat back slowly. So she canceled the wedding and kept the refunds. Rachel nodded. $7,000. My hands felt cold. For weeks, I thought she only wanted to stop the wedding. But this suggested something else. Control and punishment. Rachel looked at me carefully. Vera, I need to ask something. What? Do you want to report this? I didn't answer immediately. Reports my mother for fraud felt like crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Nathan stayed quiet. Rachel didn't pressure me. Instead, she said something practical. There's another option. What? We contact the vendors, explain what happened, ask them to review the refund authorization. Because legally, you didn't cancel those contracts. I looked at Nathan. What do you think? He shrugged slightly. I think the truth should be documented. That afternoon, Rachel drafted 3 emails. Professional. Clear. Each one included the same attachments. The voicemail recordings. The news segment link. The original contracts, signed by me. By the end of the day, 2 vendors responded. Magnolia Florals refunded the entire $2,200 deposit. Big Jim Smokehouse refunded $4,800. $7,000 returned. Not everything we lost, but enough to breathe again. The venue was more complicated. Ridge Hill Community Pavilion had a strict policy. No refunds within 30 days. But when the manager listened to the voicemail where my mother impersonated me, he paused. Then he said something unexpected. I can't refund the deposit, but I can offer a credit. $3,500 toward a future event. Nathan smiled when he heard that. We'll use it for our first anniversary party. Rachel laughed. That's the most Ridge Hill solution possible. By the end of the week, most of the financial damage had been repaired. Not completely, but enough that the disaster my mother planned never fully materialized. And something else happened too. Unexpected. 3 guests from the wedding contacted Nathan. They had noticed the chairs and tables he built for the reception. Handmade oak. Solid craftsmanship. They wanted custom furniture. A dining table, a rocking chair, a bookshelf. Within a month, Nathan's small workshop had a 3-month waiting list. I remember sitting on the porch one evening, watching him measure wood planks under the sunset light. You realize something ironic? What? Your mom tried to destroy our wedding. Nathan smiled slightly. And accidentally launched my business. For the first time in weeks, I laughed. But the story wasn't finished yet, because one question still remained unanswered. What happened to the $7,000 my mother took? And the answer arrived 2 days later, in the form of a message Uncle Tom sent me late one evening. A short sentence that changed everything again. Your mom tried to deposit the refund checks today, and the bank flagged the transaction. 26 days after my wedding, at exactly 4:37 in the afternoon, my Uncle Tom called me from the parking lot of First Ridge Community Bank and said something that made me sit down immediately. Your mom just tried to deposit the wedding refund checks, and the bank froze the transaction. Nathan was in the workshop, finishing a walnut dining table when I answered the phone. I could hear traffic behind Tom's voice. You mean the refunds from the vendors? Yeah, all of them. The florist, the caterer. $7,000 total. Tom paused. The bank flagged it as a suspicious deposit. I felt the room shift slightly. What happened? Tom sighed. The checks were written to Vera Westbrook, not Diane Westbrook. My heart started beating faster. So she couldn't cash them? Nope. The teller asked why she was depositing checks in your name. What did she say? Tom let out a quiet breath. She said you gave her permission. Of course she did. But banks have rules, especially small-town banks where everyone knows each other. And the teller knew something about that wedding. The news segment, the rumors, the empty lot. The story had spread further than my mother realized. The teller asked one simple question. Do you have written authorization from Vera Westbrook? My mother didn't. The transaction stopped immediately. The bank manager got involved, and the checks were placed on hold. Tom lowered his voice. Diane was not happy. I leaned against the kitchen counter. What did she do? First, she tried to argue, then she cried, then she accused the teller of humiliating her. The pattern was familiar. Denial, blame, victim. The exact cycle my mother had used my entire life. Tom continued. The manager told her something interesting. What? If those checks belong to Vera, she needs to deposit them herself. Otherwise, the bank has to verify authorization. Nathan walked in quietly while I was still on the phone. He could see something serious was happening. Tom said one more thing before hanging up. Vera, the manager also mentioned something else. What? If someone impersonated you to obtain those refunds, that could be considered fraud. There was that word again. Fraud. After the call ended, I told Nathan everything. He sat down slowly. So the bank stopped her. Yeah, and the checks are still there. Rachel arrived later that evening after I texted her the update. She listened carefully. Then she asked the question neither Nathan nor I had asked yet. Do you want those checks? I blinked. What do you mean? Rachel shrugged slightly. They're legally yours. The vendors refunded them because your name was on the contracts. Nathan nodded. $7,000 is not nothing. I stared at the kitchen table. For years, my mother had used money as leverage, helping with rent, helping with college, helping with anything that allowed her to say one sentence. I sacrificed everything for you. But the truth was something different. Every dollar came with a leash. Rachel tapped the table gently. Vera, this isn't about revenge. This is about ownership. I knew she was right. The next morning, Nathan and I drove to First Ridge Community Bank together. The building sat on Main Street beside the post office. Small brick structure, 3 teller windows, 1 office for the manager. The same bank my parents used when I was a child. The manager greeted us personally. Mr. David Holloway, a man who had known my father. He shook Nathan's hand firmly, then looked at me with quiet sympathy. I'm sorry for what happened with your wedding. Thank you. He led us into his office. The refund checks sat on the desk. $7,000. Written to Vera Westbrook. Mr. Holloway explained the situation carefully. Your mother attempted to deposit these yesterday. However, since the checks were written to you, we couldn't process the transaction. He paused. Given the circumstances, I thought it would be best if we contacted you directly. Nathan stayed quiet. I looked at the checks. What happens now? Mr. Holloway leaned back in his chair. That depends on you. You can deposit them, you can sign them over to your mother, or you can leave them unprocessed while the vendors investigate. I didn't hesitate. I'll deposit them. The manager nodded. Then he asked something else. Miss Westbrook, one more question. Yes? Did you authorize your mother to cancel those vendor contracts? The room went quiet. Nathan glanced at me. I shook my head. No. Mr. Holloway nodded slowly. That's what I suspected. He slid a document across the desk. If you'd like, we can document that statement formally. Not a police report, just a record in case the vendors need confirmation. Rachel had said something earlier that echoed in my mind. Document the truth. I signed the statement. 10 minutes later, the checks were deposited into our account. $7,000. Money my mother thought she could quietly take. But the story didn't end at the bank, because small towns have a second network that spreads information faster than any newspaper: conversation. And by that evening, the story had reached places my mother didn't expect: the grocery store, the church, the beauty salon. People weren't whispering anymore. They were discussing. Diane tried to deposit checks written to her daughter after canceling her wedding by pretending to be her. For the first time in my life, the narrative my mother controlled had slipped completely out of her hands. That night, Nathan and I sat on the porch, watching the sun drop behind the trees. "You okay?" "Yeah. I thought about something then." "What?" "My entire life, I thought my mom was powerful." Nathan waited. "Turns out she was just loud." Nathan smiled. "That happens a lot." I leaned back in the porch chair, but there was still one thing left unresolved. I had written my mother a letter after the wedding, setting boundaries, offering one condition for future contact: therapy. Real therapy. So far, she hadn't responded. But 2 weeks after the bank incident, something arrived at our house. No return address. Just my name written carefully on the envelope. Inside was a single pressed wildflower, and nothing else. That flower forced me to ask a question I had avoided for months. Was my mother trying to apologize? Or was she preparing for something else entirely? 6 weeks after the wedding, on a quiet Wednesday afternoon, at exactly 3:52, I opened my front door and found a cream-colored envelope sitting on the porch floor. No stamp, no return address. Just my name, written in handwriting I would recognize anywhere. Diane Westbrook's handwriting. Inside the envelope, there was no letter, no apology, no explanation. Just a single pressed wildflower, a black-eyed Susan, flattened carefully between 2 thin sheets of wax paper. And that flower forced me to ask a question I hadn't wanted to face. Was my mother trying to say sorry? Or was she trying to reopen the door she had spent months burning down? Before I continue, I want to ask you something. If someone who hurt you deeply reached out with a silent gesture instead of words, would you see it as an apology or as another way to avoid accountability? Because sometimes silence can mean regret, but sometimes it just means someone doesn't want to admit what they did. I stood in the doorway holding that flower for a long time. Nathan was in the workshop behind the house, running a table saw. The sound echoed through the yard in steady bursts. I finally stepped inside and placed the flower on the bookshelf in the living room, right beside our wedding photo. Nathan and me, under the live oaks at Elmwood Garden, fairy lights glowing, wildflowers everywhere. The same wildflowers my mother replaced with white roses months earlier. The same flowers Rachel had brought back. Nathan walked in 10 minutes later, wiping sawdust from his forearms. He saw the envelope on the table. Mail? Sort of. He opened it and examined the flower. "Your mom?" "Yeah." He studied it quietly. "No letter?" "No." Nathan leaned against the counter. "What do you think it means?" I shook my head slowly. "I don't know." That was the truth. Because my mother had always communicated through implication, through gestures, through emotional pressure instead of direct conversation. Nathan placed the flower back carefully. "Well, at least she didn't show up at the house." I smiled faintly. That was progress. But the story didn't end with the flower. 3 days later, something else happened. Something public. Something my mother had spent weeks trying to avoid. The annual Ridge Hill Fall Harvest Festival. Every October, the entire town gathered at the community pavilion. Food booths, live music, local businesses, church bake sales. About 1,500 people attended every year. And this year, Nathan had a booth. Rachel convinced him to display his furniture. The chairs he built for the wedding, the long oak reception table, a few custom pieces. I wasn't sure how I felt about going, because if my mother showed up, it would be impossible to avoid her. Rachel had a different opinion. "You should go." Why? Because hiding makes her story look true. Nathan agreed. So Saturday afternoon, we loaded Nathan's truck and drove to the pavilion. The same pavilion where my mother expected my wedding to collapse. The irony wasn't lost on me. Nathan's booth sat near the center of the event. Within an hour, 3 pieces of furniture had already sold. People loved his work. By 5 o'clock, the crowd had doubled. Music played, children ran between booths. The smell of kettle corn drifted through the air. I almost relaxed. Almost. Then Rachel touched my arm. Vera. I followed her gaze. My mother stood near the entrance. Navy coat, pearl earrings. The same composed posture she always carried in public. Except something was different. People weren't approaching her. They were avoiding her. Small shifts. Conversations ending. Groups turning away. The town had already made its decision. My mother walked slowly through the crowd. Eventually, she stopped 10 feet from Nathan's booth. Our eyes met. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then she stepped forward. Vera. Her voice sounded softer than I remembered. I nodded politely. Mom. Nathan stood beside me. Rachel quietly moved closer. My mother looked at the furniture display. Your husband is very talented. Nathan nodded once. Thank you. There was a pause. The air between us felt fragile. My mother finally looked back at me. I saw the news segment. I waited. She continued. And the bank situation. That surprised me. Word travels fast here. Yes, it does. Another silence. Then she said something unexpected. You humiliated me. There it was. Not an apology. Not regret. The familiar script. Victim. I kept my voice calm. You canceled my wedding. She inhaled sharply. I was trying to protect you. Nathan didn't speak. Rachel didn't speak. But dozens of people around us were listening. My mother noticed them. Her voice grew louder. You have no idea what I sacrificed raising you alone. I nodded slowly. You're right. She blinked. Then I said something I had rehearsed in my head many times. But that doesn't give you the right to control my life. A quiet murmur passed through the nearby crowd. My mother's expression hardened. You've changed. Yes. The word felt surprisingly easy. I have. For a moment, I thought she might explode. Instead, she did something different. Her shoulders lowered slightly. The anger drained. She looked tired. Vera, her voice dropped. I don't know how to fix this. That was the first honest sentence she had spoken in months, and it caught me off guard. I answered carefully. Start with the truth. Another pause. The festival music drifted through the air behind us. My mother glanced at Nathan, then Rachel, then the people watching. Finally, she looked back at me. I'm not ready for that. I nodded. Then we're not ready to talk. She stood there a moment longer. Then she turned and walked back through the crowd. This time, people didn't avoid her. They simply watched. Because the story had changed. The powerful mother who controlled everything was gone. In her place stood a woman who had lost the narrative. That evening, Nathan and I drove home quietly. The sunset painted the sky pink behind the fields. Rachel texted one sentence after we left the festival. You handled that perfectly. But as we pulled into our driveway, Nathan said something that made me pause. You know that wasn't the end. I looked at him. What do you mean? Nathan leaned back in his seat. People like your mom don't give up control easily. He was right. Because 2 weeks later, something arrived in the mail that proved the story still had one final chapter left. And this time, it wasn't just a flower. 2 weeks after the Fall Harvest Festival, at exactly 11:07 on a Monday morning, a certified letter arrived at my classroom at Ridge Hill Elementary. The envelope was thick, legal paper, my name typed neatly across the front, and the return address made my stomach drop. Westbrook and Hale Family Law. My mother had hired a lawyer. Before I opened that envelope, I want to ask you something. If someone in your family tried to destroy your wedding, take your money, ruin your reputation, and then hired a lawyer to rewrite the story legally, what would you expect the letter to say? Because I thought I knew. I thought it would be a threat, or maybe a demand for money. But what was inside that envelope surprised everyone. The school secretary handed it to me during lunch break. "Certified mail," she said. I signed for it. My hands felt steady, but my chest was tight. Nathan always said my mother liked control more than she liked peace. Legal letters felt like her style. I waited until after school to open it. Rachel insisted. "Don't read it alone." So that evening we sat around our kitchen table, Nathan on one side, Rachel across from me, the envelope between us. "Ready?" Rachel asked. I nodded. I slid a finger under the seal and pulled the papers out. 3 pages. The first page was written in formal legal language, but the message became clear quickly. My mother wasn't suing me. She was asking for mediation. Family mediation. Rachel blinked. "That's unexpected." Nathan leaned forward. "What exactly does it say?" I read the paragraph again. Mrs. Diane Westbrook acknowledges that recent events surrounding the cancellation of wedding vendors and public misunderstandings have created significant strain within the family. Public misunderstandings. Rachel snorted softly. Of course. I kept reading. Mrs. Westbrook is requesting a mediated meeting in the presence of a licensed family counselor and legal representative in order to resolve financial disputes and repair the relationship with her daughter. Nathan looked at me carefully. Financial disputes. I flipped to the second page. There it was. My mother claimed the wedding fund had originally included money she contributed after my father died. She was requesting reimbursement. $7,000. The exact amount of the vendor refunds. Rachel leaned back. Wow, that's bold. Nathan stayed quiet. I kept reading. The final paragraph explained something important. The mediation would include a discussion of the recorded phone call between Diane and Nathan, the one where she called me damaged goods. I looked up slowly. How do they know about the recording? Nathan frowned. We never released it publicly. Rachel's eyes widened slightly, unless someone told them. The room went quiet. Then, we all reached the same conclusion at the same time. Uncle Tom. Not intentionally, but Tom had been checking on my mother, talking to her, trying to help. And somewhere in those conversations, the existence of the recording must have surfaced. Nathan leaned back. So your mom wants mediation before that recording goes public. Rachel nodded. That makes sense. Control the damage. Rewrite the narrative. I stared at the paper. What do you think I should do? Rachel answered first. Legally, mediation is safer than court. Nathan answered second. Emotionally, only go if you're ready. I thought about the letter for a long time. My mother had spent months trying to destroy my life, but this was the first time she had acknowledged the conflict in writing, even if the wording tried to soften the truth. I flipped to the final page. There was a proposed date, 3 weeks away, at a counseling office in Athens, Georgia. Neutral ground. Rachel tapped the table. Here's the real question. What outcome do you want? I knew the answer immediately. Not revenge, not punishment, just clarity. I want the truth documented. Nathan nodded slowly. Then mediation might be the place to do that. Rachel leaned forward. And Vera, if the recording comes up, everyone in that room will finally hear her real voice. The room went quiet again. I folded the letter carefully. 3 weeks. 3 weeks until I would sit across from my mother in a room where manipulation wouldn't work the same way. Because mediators don't respond to tears. They respond to facts. Nathan squeezed my hand. You don't have to go alone. Rachel grinned. Obviously. The following days passed quietly. Teaching, Nathan working in the shop, life returning to something normal. But in the background, something else was building. The final confrontation. 3 weeks later, we drove to Athens for the mediation meeting. The office building sat on a quiet street near downtown. Neutral. Professional. Rachel waited in the lobby while Nathan and I entered the conference room. My mother was already there, sitting at the far side of the table beside her lawyer. For the first time in months, she didn't look perfectly composed. She looked older, tired. The mediator introduced himself, Dr. Samuel Kent, licensed family therapist. 30 years of experience. He began with simple rules: no interruptions, no accusations without evidence, respectful conversation. Then he turned to my mother. Mrs. Westbrook, you requested this meeting. Why? My mother folded her hands. For the first time since the wedding, she looked directly at me. Because I lost my daughter. The room stayed silent. Then Dr. Kent asked the question that mattered. And what role do you believe your actions played in that loss? My mother hesitated, the longest pause I had ever seen from her. Nathan and I waited, because the next sentence she spoke would determine whether this story ended with reconciliation or with a permanent goodbye. And for the first time in my life, my mother had no script prepared. 3 months after my wedding, at exactly 2:16 in the afternoon, my mother finally said a sentence I had waited my entire life to hear. Not in our kitchen, not in a phone call, but in a quiet mediation room in Athens, Georgia, sitting across a table with a therapist and 2 witnesses. She said 4 words. I was wrong, Vera. Before I tell you what happened in that room, I want to ask you something. If someone who hurt you deeply finally admitted the truth, would that automatically fix everything? Or would the damage still need time to heal? Because apologies don't erase the past. They just change what comes next. The mediation room was small. Neutral beige walls, 1 window, a rectangular table with 6 chairs. My mother sat on one side beside her attorney. Nathan sat beside me. Dr. Samuel Kent sat at the head of the table with a legal notepad. Rachel waited in the lobby just outside the door. The air felt still. Dr. Kent spoke first. Mrs. Westbrook, earlier you said you felt you lost your daughter. What role do you believe your actions played in that? My mother's fingers tightened around each other. For the first time since I could remember, she didn't rush to answer. 30 seconds passed, then a full minute. Finally, she looked up at me. Not at the lawyer, not at the therapist. At me. I tried to stop you from getting married. Her voice sounded quieter than usual. Why? Dr. Kent asked gently. Another pause. Fear. The word landed softly. What were you afraid of? My mother exhaled slowly. Being alone. The honesty in that moment surprised everyone in the room. She continued. After your father died, everything changed. It felt like the ground disappeared under me. Vera was the only stable thing I had left. Dr. Kent nodded. So when Vera became independent, you panicked. Yes, my mother swallowed. I told myself I was protecting her, but I was really protecting myself. The room stayed silent. Nathan's hand rested lightly over mine. Dr. Kent leaned forward slightly. Mrs. Westbrook, do you acknowledge canceling the wedding vendors while pretending to be Vera? My mother nodded once. Yes. Do you acknowledge telling people she was mentally unstable? Yes. Do you acknowledge attempting to deposit refund checks written in her name? Yes. Each answer felt like a stone being placed on the table. Solid, undeniable. Then Dr. Kent asked the most important question. Why are you here today? My mother looked directly at me again. Because I realized something. What? The moment you walked down that aisle without me, I understood I didn't control your life anymore. She inhaled slowly, and I didn't know who I was without that control. The honesty was uncomfortable, but real. Then she said the sentence that changed everything. I was wrong, Vera. Not a performance, not tears, just 4 simple words. I waited. Years of history sat between us. Doctor, Kent looked at me. Vera, how do you want to respond? I thought carefully, because this moment wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about boundaries. I love you, Mom. Her eyes filled slightly. But I can't go back to the way things were. She nodded slowly. I understand. I leaned forward slightly. If we're going to have a relationship, it has to be different. Different how? No control, no guilt, no manipulation. Just honesty. My mother wiped her eyes quietly. That sounds fair. Dr. Kent spoke again. Mrs. Westbrook, what steps are you willing to take to rebuild trust? My mother answered immediately. Therapy, regular therapy. Not 2 sessions, not 3, however long it takes. Dr. Kent nodded approvingly. And the financial dispute? My mother shook her head. The $7,000 belongs to Vera. I'm not asking for it anymore. Her lawyer scribbled something on his notes. For the first time that afternoon, the tension in the room shifted. Not gone, but lighter. After 2 hours, the mediation session ended. Nothing magical happened. No dramatic hug. No perfect reconciliation. Just something quieter. A beginning. Outside the office, Rachel stood up the moment we walked out. Well? Nathan smiled slightly. Progress. Rachel exhaled. I'll take that. My mother walked past Rachel slowly. For a moment, it looked like she might say something. Instead, she simply nodded once. Then she left. 6 months later, my life looks very different. Nathan's furniture business now has a 6-month waiting list. The wedding chairs he built for Elmwood Garden became his signature design. 3 local restaurants ordered custom tables. 2 Atlanta interior designers started referring clients. Our house is still small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a porch that Nathan still hasn't repainted. But it's ours. I'm still teaching 3rd grade. Mrs. Daniels still leaves a cupcake on my desk every Friday. Rachel still shows up at our house without warning and drinks all our coffee. And my mother? She's still in therapy. Uncle Tom tells me she hasn't missed a single appointment in 4 months. We talk occasionally, short phone calls, careful conversations. Not perfect, but real. The pressed black-eyed Susan she left on our porch still sits on the bookshelf beside our wedding photo. Sometimes I look at it and think about something my father told me years ago. Don't let anyone shrink you, not even me. For 28 years, I thought love meant sacrifice. Now I understand something different. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's captivity. And the day I stopped asking permission to live my own life was the day my life actually began. Before we end, I want to ask you something. Do you have someone in your life who tries to control you with guilt or fear? Or maybe someone who once did? Tell me in the comments, because sometimes hearing someone else's story reminds us we're not alone. And if this story meant something to you, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. There's another story on this channel about a woman whose in-laws locked her out of their family for 5 years, until one Thanksgiving dinner changed everything. Trust me, that one is worth hearing. Wherever you are in the world right now, I hope you find your own version of Elmwood Garden. And I'll see you in the next story.